Welcome to the Lowdown. I'm Michael Smith, and today joining me is CEO and co-founder of Aalo Atomics, Matt Loszak. Matt, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, as we were kind of talking about earlier, just excited to get going in 2026. So much is happening. But one of the things is, a few years back, I heard about the new Atomic Age 2.0. And when I think of nuclear, I go back to the days, Matt. I was in Clear Lake, Texas, in Friendswood, and I had drills where I had to go under my desk to practice nuclear fallout drills. So that was my first experience with nuclear. But we got a new nuclear age. It's cleaner, safer, and more reliable. But I thought I'd open up, just tell us a little bit about it. How's this different? And, how did you get involved in this?
Well, yeah, so first of all, in the first atomic age, there was a lot of innovation, a lot of technology got developed. And what we were left with from that first atomic age was an incredible energy source, right? People often kind of misconstrue the energy source and the weapon that might have caused those safety drills. And really, it's like the difference between a stick of incense and a stick of TNT. They're really just two different products right now. Yeah, so the result of that first atomic age was around 400 power plants around the world, with now 70 years of operational history that have proven themselves to be as safe as solar and wind. And so there's now this kind of new movement to try to take what was done in the past and essentially mass produce it, make it deployable at many, many gigawatts per year of scale to power AI data centers largely, is the major source of demand for today. But it really could be deployed for so many other things thereafter in terms of desalination, industrial process heat, large utility, even small utility. So, and the kind of key thing to realize is there's enough nuclear fuel to last us 4 billion years,
Wow.
instead of maybe just another couple hundred. So it really is the technology of the future for energy, now that it's proven itself to be that scalable, that safe, et cetera. So what we're doing at Aalo is we have the best product for powering AI data centers. It's the most scalable, most inherently safe, most reliable, and most economical. So we'd love to dive deeper.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Again, I've heard about it a few years ago. The kind of the coming new nuclear renaissance. What got you interested? At what point? I know you're an engineering physics background, but at what point did you find, okay, you know what, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to go. I'm just curious on that.
Well, I first got interested in nuclear growing up in Ontario. I used to have pretty bad asthma, breathing attacks. One time that stands out in my memory was when I had an attack and I was an hour away from the nearest hospital. And so had to kind of be rushed there. And, the feeling of not being able to breathe is pretty terrifying. And this was largely because we had a lot of coal power plants. We had 62 smog days per year in Ontario at the time. And so, fortunately, the government decided to turn off all those coal plants and we went all in on nuclear. Lo and behold, smog days went to zero and my asthma went away. And that was one of my first interactions where I thought, wow, and nuclear is pretty incredible. And so I studied nuclear engineering and physics in university, and also started some summer businesses. I got the entrepreneurial itch, and so when I graduated, I thought, hey, maybe there's a way to combine all these interests. Maybe start a nuclear business, but unfortunately, Fukushima had just happened, so wasn't the best time to start a nuclear company. And so instead, taught myself to code. Did 10 years of software companies, sold the last one for around 150 million. Um, but around 2021 or 2022, the time felt right to go out and start the nuclear company.
Well, timing is everything. We've seen companies start before. We've seen some of the space companies that started years earlier, and they just ran out of funding. We got the presidential executive orders, and I thought maybe tell us a little bit about that, and then why do you believe the timing is now for nuclear?
As of this past July, the Trump administration, with Energy Secretary Chris Wright, put out these 4 executive orders for nuclear. And momentum was already building for nuclear, but this really actually supercharged it. So what this allowed us to do is sign what's called an OTA with the DOE to basically be a direct contractor, bypassing bureaucracy at the national lab. Many people in the past thought it would not be possible to build a little shed outhouse in a year or two, let alone a whole new nuclear power plant. But in fact, since we now have the OTA signed and we are doing DOE authorization instead of NRC for our first plant, we've been moving at a speed that has shocked basically everyone. So 2 years ago, October of 2 years ago, we were a two-person company. Today we are 100, and we've already started construction on our first plant. The building is almost done. The reactor and all the balance of plant are being made in the factory as we speak. And this plant will turn on before July 4th of this year, in the next few months. So this is the second atomic age. Things are happening much faster than most people expect. Yes, we are very proud of our speed.
Well, it's very nice. Yeah, I think it was yesterday, the day before, Department of Energy awarded $2.7 billion to 3 nuclear companies. How does that keep fueling with what you're doing, or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, we think that's really actually just going to be the tip of the iceberg. So what that funding was going towards is fuel supply chain. So the U.S. is spinning up more enrichment facilities and more supply chain there, because right now the fuel supply chain can support, for us especially, because we chose UO2 fuel, around 40 gigawatts per year of capacity. So that enrichment capacity will help to go to higher levels of enrichment than 5%, up to 10%, 20%, which is known as HALEU. So that's the big unlock there. Another big program, which was not yet announced as a firm figure, is called the Janus program, which will be a number of nuclear companies, and we're in the running for this, to deploy at military sites, kind of similar to COTS for SpaceX that helped them get off the ground. So that'll be most likely another several hundred million, if not in the billions, and that'll be announced more soon. So these are just the initial programs getting started, but I think the bottom line is you're seeing the politicians looking around the world and seeing Russia and China making major progress on energy deployment, nuclear deployment, AI deployment, and it's really a kind of a global race right now to get enough power infrastructure built to not fall behind on AI, because that is really an existential thing to fall behind on.
Well, let's go back a little bit, and because you did mention earlier about the founders, I know that your co-founders got a pretty interesting background. Maybe talk a little bit about that and kind of how that adds to what your value proposition of Aalo and what you guys are delivering.
Yep. So my co-founder is Yasser. He's our co-founder CTO. He and I graduated around the same time. I went into startups. He went right into nuclear. So he joined Westinghouse, worked his way up the ranks. He ended up leading, first of all, doing research on AB1000 before leading the microreactor entrant from Westinghouse. In fact, he may have even coined the term microreactor. And so that program occurred, and then he moved on to Idaho National Lab, where he led the MARVEL program. And the thing of note there is that this was the first reactor that the DOE had ever authorized for approval for construction. So it kind of, for us, we always knew that DOE would be the faster, easier pathway for the first of a kind, since the NRC was not as structurally set up to regulate new innovative technology. And so we started DOE. We always say we started it before it was cool. We started our DOE authorization process 2.5 years ago, and last summer was when the executive orders said, okay guys, DOE authorization is the way to go, and we said, we know, we're already on the case. And so that's why we've been able to go so quickly, and in fact, in a week or two, as of today's recording, we have what's called our final design review with DOE. So we are very close to having this all wrapped up and turning this first power plant on, which is not just a plant, it'll also have a co-located data center with a partner.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This is exciting. Yeah.
Well, I think and one of the things I've been reading, so it is a race. You do have, I think it's 3 companies that are going to be picked on the executive order. And it sounds like you guys are pretty far in the lead. But one thing I read is that your fuel source is a good differentiator, kind of what helps you get in the lead. Maybe if you can explain that, maybe what other fuel sources are people using, and why is what you guys are doing seem to be beneficial?
a lot of the competitors in this space did their design 5 or 10 years ago. And so they were designing not for multi gigawatt scale. They were designing for other things. For example, remote military, like 1 megawatt here or there. They were designing for 1 or 2 plants that might want to do waste burning. They could use nuclear waste as fuel. So companies like Radiant or Oklo or TerraPower, all of these companies, they require either HALEU, which is the 20% enrichment, or TRISO, which is the special fuel form factor. Um, the bottom line is the supply chain for those fuels is awful right now, and it'll take at least 5 years to get that spun up. You're seeing the DOE, like you said, appropriated some money, but it takes years for that money to turn into a stronger supply chain. And the AI data center demand is today. We have to be able to scale today. So we use uranium dioxide fuel. It's traditional fuel from water-based reactors around the world today, and it's at 5% enrichment. We're going up to higher to LEU plus 8%. But like I said, the supply chain for this fuel is 40 gigawatts per year worth. So there's a ton available to us for deployment.
So you're talking about your market and definitely talking about scaling. So it seems like you're on track. If you hit all these markers by July 4th, what's next? I mean, I see behind you, you got a nice picture there of your, warehouse. I've been to it. It's pretty impressive. But tell me about, meeting demand, your client. You mentioned AI data centers, potential military. Talk to me about your client, your market, and then your scalability.
So yeah, a lot of people don't realize that having this degree of a factory focus this early in a nuclear company is quite rare. And it's really a learning from the SpaceX or the Tesla of the world, vertical integration, factory focus, building in design for manufacturability and assembly, DFMA, from day one, is not really obvious to all vendors. So Oklo, for example, they reached a $24 billion market cap. They are a fully remote company. They don't have a factory. So this kind of is the traditional model. It's nothing against them. It's that the way nuclear was done in the past is you had nuclear designers design the plant, send to dozens of suppliers who each have their own factory, and then you try to assemble on site. But that's a project. That's not a product. And that's where you have cost overruns, schedules overruns. Vogtle went 10 years over schedule, $15 billion over budget for this exact reason. So in our view, the only way to stand a chance at servicing the AI data center demand is to invest heavily in vertically integrating in the factory from day one. And that's what we've done. So it's a very scalable design. And as we've talked about, the fuel was one good example. There's countless others. We really try to not use unobtainium in this reactor design, right? So it's a supply chain that exists, is scalable, and that's a huge differentiator. It might sound obvious, but this is a big differentiator for what Aalo is doing.
Okay, and then you guys you're building XMRs and SMRs, and what's the difference there? And what are you guys building?
Yeah, well, we hate to introduce new acronyms. There's already
I know.
in the space, but we thought it was warranted because this really highlights the difference in what we're doing. So, small modular reactor, people might have heard of. The reality is, it's never really been done right. You know what I mean? So, everything we just described kind of shows that an SMR, small modular reactor, it doesn't really hit the mark when all the modules come from different factories and they're not meant to be integrated together properly. So we thought, hey, maybe there's a new term, XMR, extra modular reactor, that highlights the fact that we have a single factory that takes all the raw materials in and a few different components that we do buy, but then puts them into modules that we know that we can test and integrate at the factory and know will snap together easily at site. And that has never been done before, and that is why we thought maybe a new term is warranted, XMR.
Well, you know what? We introduce new acronyms in all of our industries, so thanks for explaining that. And it is something, the first one I think I've heard about you guys doing is XMR, so that's a different one there. Well, so let's talk about it again. Once you get, I guess, called first critical, right? If you reach that point by July 4th, it sounds like you're on track to do it. I mean, how many can we produce? How fast can you produce? I mean, again, I've seen the warehouse, it's big, but tell me how fast you guys can scale and reach that demand.
Yeah, so the essentially in the past 2.5 years, we've raised 150 million. This year, after criticality, that historic milestone, we'll be raising around a 500 million Series C. That is going towards two main things. One is the first commercial deployment, project equity, but more to answer your question, the second thing that's going towards is our gigawatt factory. So what you see behind me is 40,000 square feet. It's a great place to build the pilot and a bunch of our first few plants. But really what we have to do is scale to several gigawatts per year of capacity. And so our gigawatt factory will be 1 million square feet. It'll take all the learnings from the pilot factory and scale that to be able to meet the demand that we have in front of us for these data centers. The level of demand, right, is 100 gigawatts in the US alone in the next 5 years. So, you can imagine how much capacity we need to service even a slice of that. And we want to do a big slice.
So it sounds like you guys are positioned because of the warehouse to actually get the scalability faster than maybe some of your other competitors. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's because of the factory focus and also having the right product, right? So a lot of competitors are using TRISO or HALEU, things for which there's no fuel supply chain today. So you can't wave a magic wand and make that appear. That'll take many years, and so no fuel, no party. So everything we chose is really around scalability to many gigawatts per year rapidly.
Well, let's talk about one thing that I know as soon as you're up and operational, and then we're seeing this get into the media, you're going to start talking about safety concerns, right? Because nuclear safe is where people want to get. I know something within your coolant, but I'm going to let you dig into what keeps you guys, or what makes you guys, and what you're doing safe. How can you tell people you're safe?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, we got to acknowledge that existing nuclear is very safe. There's a morbid statistic called deaths per kilowatt hour. It's how many people die for every unit of energy that's produced. And it is on par with solar and wind. And fascinatingly, that's even including Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, and Fukushima. So in TMI and Fukushima, there were 0 deaths. But the thing is, you don't want to be too hand-wavy about that, because what there were relocations. And you don't want to have relocations. That's really what we mean by safe. So there's a few things that make this design more inherently safe. One is its atmospheric pressure. Water-based designs are very, very pressurized, which means that if something goes wrong, it can pop off in some way. In this case, there's no pressure in the system, so nothing can cause it to expand rapidly and get out into the environment. The other factor is sodium liquid metal as our coolant is a very high thermal conductivity and a very high boiling point. And when you take those things together, it means that you avoid something like a Fukushima, where what happened there is they lost backup power, and they needed backup power to keep it cool even when it was shut down. So in our situation, we don't need backup power to keep it cool when it's shut down. It naturally circulates, naturally removes that heat. So there's a bunch of these kind of different failure modes that are engineered around in very clever ways. The net result is at the plant boundary, that is essentially what's called the EPZ, the emergency planning zone, meaning traditional reactors, for miles, you'd have to send the local civilians iodine tablets or something like that to say, hey, look, if something does go wrong, take these. In this case, we don't need to do that, because the plant boundary is the furthest any risk actually is. And that's mathematically provable in the licensing case through what's called probabilistic risk assessment. But anyway, that's getting a little bit too deep probably on the tech jargon. But
that's okay. That's good. Well, and I got maybe 2 more questions. And one, where do you kind of see Aalo the next 5 to 10 years? Can you give your company vision there? And then the last question I would say is, you got a lot of potential jobs that can be created. What jobs are you guys creating? Maybe what do you tell to a young person right now that's looking to get into school and figure out what they want to do? The world's changing with AI. What would be your advice? And then I will leave it there.
Well, yeah. So our company kind of 3-step top secret master plan is to start by servicing the hyperscalers with AI data centers where they have a huge amount of demand and a lot of urgency, and they're willing to pay a premium for speed. then we'll bring the cost down and go after traditional utilities, help them bolster the grid, make the grid more resilient, reliable, power a lot of things like desalination, industrial process heat. And then the third step of the top secret master plan is to go after developing nations and help them come out of energy poverty, help lower the cost of energy such that there's no such thing as an energy-rich poor country. The more energy you use, the more wealth you can build. So we want to do what's right for all of humanity and help on that front as well. So that's really the goal, is to have our gigawatt factories around the world, helping to bring energy abundance to everyone. And so, if I was a younger person today getting started in my career, I would, be looking at working in the world of atoms and helping to distribute wealth across the world and lower the cost of energy and intelligence such that everyone can live a longer, healthier life of abundance. I think we can achieve that kind of outcome if we all believe it. That's actually why we called it Aalo, the light. It's a bright, optimistic future. That's what I would say.
Well, I love the name. I love the mission. Thank you for, taking your time, your effort, your money to, try to solve a critical problem and help humanity. I think that's amazing. We're going to be watching you close, and we're going to be rooting for you hard. But Matt, thank you so much for coming on today, and we'll be talking soon.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.